We've briefly talked in the last video about the many possible reasons that people will resist, and we categorized some of the types of resistance. We're now going to categorize the reasons that people resist change. This becomes a turning point in that we are now starting to get into a better understanding of how we can categorize actions to reduce the likelihood or the severity of the resistance itself. Typical reasons why people resist then. Something new to be learned. This is really in all change programs because we know that if something is to be done different, they need to be trained. People need to understand how to do what needs to be done in a different way. So we respond with a training program. New skills, new knowledge, and the attempt here is to reduce the fear of failure. Their fear of failure because they don't know what they need to do differently. But at the same time, we know that productivity will fall because there's a learning curve to become fully skilled at the change. But while we're doing that, they're also under time pressure because they have to continue to do the old job while learning something new. There's also a typical reason of loss of something. Something that they've had in the past, possibly the benefits, the compensation, different positions will have an impact there. The authority that they have over others or over budget or over the decision-making process, the responsibilities they've had, maybe even the status and the prestige they hold within the organization. All of that can change, as well as opportunities for advancement or other things in the future can all be changed dramatically by some organizational change outside of their control. So the typical response there is respond to them by bargaining. Same as we respond with training for something new, the typical management response is to respond with bargaining for the loss of something. If you do this, we'll do this type of bargaining. There's also the issue of poor timing. Too many things at one time, too many change initiatives at one time, in which case you're putting unnecessary pressure on trying to expect people to really accomplish more than they are mentally able to accomplish. Typical reasons why people resist change. There's also cultural or those social pressures within the organization, the traditions, the climate of trust or mistrust within the organization, and the worker relationships. The relationships they have with the peers within their work group or across the organization may be altered in many ways. The response there is possibly a second change initiative. A lot of times when you do a single change, there's a cascading effect. And we often don't get it right that you don't change the foundation before you start building the house. In which case, if you start building the house, you may find that the cultural foundation is insufficient. So all of a sudden, you are trying to build the house and rebuild or reinforce the foundation. This leads into change fatigue as well as conflict in the organization. The reason then is resistance occurs because of what is put in place and the sequence that things are put in place. There's also personal factors, those that are often hidden from the people and definitely hidden from the person leading the change. The predisposition to change, their attitude toward ambiguity. To what extent do they need certainty to give them comfort? The surprise and fear of the unknown. All change has some surprise factor, particularly if the context of the problem has not been built previously. There's also potential conflicts within the people, the personalities that are involved. Organizations have dynamics based upon individual relationships that can be altered dramatically by change. Typical reasons why people resist change. However, many of these we have to dig deeper, particularly in the personal factors, the things that are hidden from our view, the things that you discover only by running into them, not in advance by figuring out why they may happen. Ignoring the essentials. This goes back to earlier presentations of what are the essentials that you have to get right to be successful in leading a change initiative. If you do not do these essentials correctly, you will get resistance. Knowing what to change, but more importantly, what not to change. Too often, resistance occurs because we are changing things that have a ripple effect and we are not protecting the core cultural values or the things that make the strategic competencies work. We may not see that, but others in the organization see it and thereby will resist for things that we are ignoring. We need to differentiate change leadership from change management. Change is not one size fits all. You have to lead the vision, but manage the change process. These are not one or the other, they're complementary. You must do both. Same as any position in the organization. Too often we use leadership and management interchangeably. They're not. Leadership functions are different from management functions, and in change to become even more important to use the right function of leadership or the right function of management when necessary. Failure to use the right approach will gain resistance and not success. We also need to know how to involve people. So you've got change leadership, change management, change enablement, enabling the people to get involved, because going back to the first video, people don't necessarily resist change, they resist being changed. By involving them avoids the being changed conflict. Change fatigue. Let's come back to this a little bit more detail now, in that we need to manage a change portfolio. We mentioned before having multiple change initiatives, sometimes building upon one another. And if you try to do too much at one time or in too rapid of a succession, people get tired, mentally exhausted from the change process, sometimes physically exhausted by trying to do multiple changes and keeping the organization running at the same time. Some time is needed to stabilize between changes. And when we talk about types of changes, some are discontinuous, some are sequential, and some are discontinuous, very disjointed. This requires some conscious understanding of a long-term change we're trying to accomplish and how the smaller change initiatives all fit together. If you attempt too much, change fatigue will set in. So we're talking about then managing a portfolio, and that as resistance develops, the organizational energy will keep being distracted from one into the next, and you get into lack of priorities or disjointed priorities, disjointed actions. What is driving training? What is driving change resistance?